Jay, you'll be able to see what my Business 610, this is a management class, has done over the course of the semester, working on trying to get a Charleston organization for what you're trying to do with diversity and leadership. The title of their organization, or the title of the conference as they called it, is The Drum is Beating, and they will take it from here. I might ask some questions just to kind of help guide them onto the path if I see something, but otherwise this is all them. So here we are. You're on.
Alrighty, good evening. So for this presentation, we'll have myself, Kendra Yates, presenting. We'll have Lila presenting. We'll also have Mr. Brad presenting and Chris presenting. So from there, we're going to start off with just a preview of what the presentation is about.
Argument a 10-inch Columbia, 3 smoothbore 32-pounders, a 42-pound carronade, a 10-inch coast mortar, and 4 12-pound howitzers, plus a garrison of about 1,000 men. As many of you gentlemen may be aware, for the last 4 days, our Navy has weakened Wagner with a constant barrage. Headquarters has determined a time for our attack. We will proceed with a direct frontal assault tomorrow at dusk. Problem, gentlemen, is the approach. The ocean and the marsh leave only a narrow strip of sand, a natural defile through which we can only send 1 regiment at a time. Now, our best hope is that leading regiment can keep the Rebs occupied long enough for reinforcements to exploit the breach. Needless to say, casualties in the leading regiment may be extreme.
General Strong, 54th Massachusetts, request the honor of leading the attack on Fort Wagner.
It's Colonel Shaw, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
You and your men haven't slept for 2 days.
That's right, sir.
Do you think they have the strength to lead this charge?
There's more to fighting than rest, sir. There's character. There's strength of heart. You should have seen us in action 2 days ago. We were a sight to see. We'll be ready, sir. When do you want us?
So this is The Drum is Beating. This leadership seminar is based off of what we just saw. That was the 54th Mass and their Lieutenant Shaw, who was leading them. So we were instructed to present a leadership seminar based off of the 54th Mass, which is what we saw right there and what they were presenting. So today for our presentation, we will be doing a Clips on Glory, which is what we just saw. We'll have a project overview. It's basically what it took to make this seminar happen, what we did to make it happen. Then we'll have the seminar program presentation, everything that the program is going to entail. We'll have a break. Then we'll have the Instructor Manual presentation, the logistics and the budget presentation, lessons learned, and then a conclusion. So, the project requirements. For the project, we had to do a 2.5-day seminar based off the 54th Mass in Fort Wagner, design a comprehensive leadership seminar that was based off of the 54th Mass. And then it was to be held in and around Charleston, which is where this clip that you saw took place, and then map out the lessons in the Instructor Manual. This seminar was supposed to be for at least 15 to 20 people, but it then was extended later on, and we'll talk about that later. And then we also had to include the cost and everything else that would make this seminar a success. So checkpoint 1. Within our project, we had different checkpoints. So during our checkpoints, we had to discuss what we were working on, where we were within the project, and what we've done. So in checkpoint 1, we shared our organizational chart, our project timeline. We shared who the president and vice president were going to be. the results of our first discussion board and what was required, and the results of our DPR1, the next steps that we were going to do, and then the feedback that we received from Dr. Grace. So our organizational chart included president, myself, vice president, Lila. We had our research department. Our lead was Frederick. Lila was also a member of that group, and Donovan. In our seminar program, we had lead was Brian, and then Emily. In our instructor manual, Brad was the lead, and Anna. In site visits, Brandon and Donovan. In the editing group, we had Brianna and Aubin. And then in logistics, we had Chris and Joe. For the presentation, we had Kendra, myself, Brianna, Lila, Brad, and Chris. So for our project timeline, we presented the following. So for our project timeline, we just had a template of what we were going to start off with, divided into different groups. So each group had different areas of where they would work on. So they had different dates that had different tasks that needed to be done at certain times. Within that timeline, we also had what we felt would work and what would not work, but we also made adjustments to it within as the project went along, because as you know, timelines change within whatever's going on.
Your cursor came over to the screen, so if you push it one way or the other, you might be able to get it. There you go.
There you go. There you go. Alrighty, so the deadline was, project due date was today. And so far during that time, we had submitted bullet points that represented the history of the 54th and the 55th Mass. We also submitted 3 activities each that we felt would be good for the project. And then we just, like I stated, we had different tasks and due dates that would be due for it, and different members who would do those. Alrighty, so for our first discussion, the requirement was, the first part was the research phase. So Dr. Curtis gave us different discussion boards to help us in the planning of the project. So the first discussion board was to find and post useful research about the 54th and 55th Mass and their connection to the local Charleston area. We also were to provide a page of bullet point findings, and then we should provide multiple citations. Each student should have a minimum of 10 distinct references. We did this, and it was very successful. We came up with a lot of different research and different points about it. And then on the results of it were a Google Doc that we came up with. So we were able to divide the research in different topics. So we came up with different topics for all of the research documents to be put under. And then we had a Google Doc that we found. And then we communicated and found out how we were going to break everything up for the project. So this is our Google Doc. And our research team did a great job in organizing the Google Doc. Those are the different areas that we broke it up into, and all of the research that was
Read the categories for.
Okay, the categories were, the first one was setting the stage. The next was recruiting. Then we had pre-attack on battery. Then we had attack on the battery, the post-attack, looking back, and different leadership points. We also had site locations, Fort Sumter, and information on a 54th Mass speaker. So the next steps after the first DB1 were, first checkpoint, the research group led by stating the assigned readings that they had and how we broke them up against the class on who would be doing the reading. Then the logistics group and the site visit group will begin working on the seminar locations and rentals, finding out prices, locations that can work, and then the class will begin finding leadership activities that we would put into the seminar. Checkpoint 2. So in checkpoint 2, we shared the leadership lessons that we found. We also shared some of the leadership activities, our discussion board, the results, and feedback from Dr. Gertis, as well as our next steps. The leadership lessons that we found, we created a Google Doc to put those research lessons into. This one also was done by the research team as well. So we had different leadership lessons, and as you can see in black are the quotes, and then in red was a leadership lesson that could be described within each of those. So we had servant leadership, leading by example. Leadership is about relationships. Leaders create leaders, resilience, and remembering those who were lost. So our leadership activities, as we looked at those different leadership points, we then created a document of how to track the leadership activities. Everyone gave at least 3 leadership activities that they felt would be good for the project, and then we created this document to show all of those. So we didn't come up with 150, but you went to another tab. Yeah, there you go.
If you move over to the left, it'll bring you all the way to A again.
To the left, there you go. There we go.
There you go.
Alrighty, so in every bracket, we had a location, the activity, what will be learned, the cost, and the length. And we did this so it would be easier when we decided to break down what activities we would use. And that was our way of organizing that. So in the discussion board too, it was our organizational phase. Now that we have a preliminary research and organized ourselves, what are your goals? You have just reviewed the 4 disciplines. What are your lead and lag measures? So during this time, we were supposed to, each group was supposed to tell their lead and lag measures of what would help them get the project done and what would hinder them from getting the project done. So during this time, we had to make sure everything was all together, and then we also had to discuss it with 5 of our classmates to see if they agreed or disagreed on what we were doing. During this time, the results of that were each group provided their group goals to meet the upcoming deadlines. Some new deadlines were created. Additional requirements were added to the timeline. Each group shared what they felt would be needed to make the project successful, and feedback and suggestions were given and received. The feedback from Dr. Gertis during this checkpoint was we were at a good start. Make sure the activities are feasible and provide leadership lessons. Make sure we are doing the required readings. He also suggested that we did not continue with the following activities: the visit to the Beaufort National Cemetery just because of the distance, the walk, the Cooper River Bridge, and the Charleston jail tour, as well as some others. The next steps after this checkpoint, the site visit group were to go visit the activity locations. The logistics group will look into the cost of selected activities. The research group will research background information on the activities that were selected, and the seminar group will start finding project design ideas. Checkpoint 3. During this checkpoint, site visits gave an update, logistics gave an update, the seminar program design, activities, the spring break, and feedback from Dr. Gertis. So during this time, the site visit group contacted Days In They reached out to historian Karen Stokes to help find a starting location for the seminar. They started groups, stating that groups next steps to contact Days In on clarity of the meeting room and forward information to the logistics group. The seminar program update at this time, they gave the group, they sent out before we came to class 2 designs for the program. The first design that they sent out was this design. And then the next design was this design. At that time that they sent it out, the entire class voted on which one they wanted to move forward with, and we decided to move forward with the second design. Spring break. During spring break, we decided that we would not do any work. We have been working up until this point nonstop, so we decided to take a break. So everybody was not to communicate. If they did, they weren't to expect to receive a response. It was a little harder for others not to do any work during this time, but some people actually did take a break. We didn't want burnout to actually happen during this time. Feedback from Dr. Gertis during this checkpoint was the group is doing a good job and he is impressed on how far we've gotten. Make sure a hotel has a meeting location. If not, then look at other options. Other hotel options were okay, but the facilitator wants us to use Days In. Double check to make sure program pictures are public domain and make sure we're doing the required readings. Checkpoint 4. During this checkpoint, there was an update from pretty much all of the project groups. Then we had discussed our discussion board and the results, and then the feedback from Dr. Gertis. During the Instructor Manual update, the Instructor Manual group lead shared with the class the shell of the Instructor Manual and what it would look like, which is basically what this is right here. And then he asked for assistance with attention grabbers and activities. The site visit group provided different hotel options and prices for renting their meeting spaces, informed the group about the Charleston County Library was free to rent, confirmed that Bethel Church would host the group, and then provided distance information for each activity. The seminar program update group informed everyone that they were able to include links to the program, which was a good idea. We can now, with the program, click on different topics and it'll bring up locations, menus, things of that nature, but you'll see more of that within the presentation. And they also requested clarity on activities and scheduling and meal locations. Like we stated earlier, the timeline definitely changed within the project. So this is just the updated version of the timeline at that time. We added a few things because some deadlines were missed and then some more information was needed. The discussion board. DB3 was our last discussion board. At this time, it was the deliverable phase. We were supposed to demonstrate your success in the meeting of the objectives that you set, and then each department manager was to confirm whether or not you did it. During the results of DB3, each group provided their group goals to meet the upcoming deadlines. So new deadlines were created. Additional requirements were added to the timeline, and each group shared what they felt would be needed to make the project successful. And as always, feedback and suggestions were given and received. And the feedback from Dr. Gertis during this time was it was a good idea to add the links to the program. Asked difference with the hotels and the meeting locations as far as price-wise. Clarity that the Instructor Manual group won't be able to finish until the very end, and then that we were still doing a good job. And that was very true. Checkpoint 5. During this checkpoint, activity update, since we had a curveball thrown in there, seminar program update, logistics update, and feedback from Dr. Curtis. So after the curveball that was thrown in, was a curve, not really a curve, because we were on such a good track that we kind of just picked it up right where we were. There were some added activities that were requested, so we made sure we got those in. So this is just a breakdown of what was requested after we had already started, and some extension to the days, an added boat tour, adding the number of people possibly, and then trying to see different cost ratios for it. So since the added curveball, we added the Morris Island tour and picnic, Slave Museum tour, and then the Magnolia Plantation tour at the time. The seminar program update. They shared that they updated the program with the newly added activities and updated the program with the newly added restaurants. The logistics update. During this time, the logistics group shared the updated budget sheet that included the updates requested by crew as well as Dr. Curtis. And this is just a preview of the first part of that, but later on in the presentation, we'll get farther into that. During this time, feedback from Dr. Curtis was good job adjusting to the unexpected curveball, suggested that we do not use Magnolia Plantation and use Mcleod Plantation instead, asked that logistics create a separate budget sheet for the local attendees, suggested that the seminar program group add menu links to the meal locations, and then a good job continue to fine tune. Checkpoint 6. This was our last checkpoint, so all of the groups gave an update, and then we had feedback from Dr. Curtis. The activity update was after the previous class, the Magnolia Plantation tour was removed from the program, and the Mcleod Plantation tour was added to the program. The seminar program update, the program group shared that they have added the restaurant menus to the program. The seminar program group shared that they will update the program with the name of the caterers from the first night's meal. The logistics group shared that an update was made to the budget and now show the cost for local attendees. And the Instructor Manual group shared that the manual is complete with a few additions and edits needed. The presentation group shared an outline with the presentation the day before we came to class, and then shared who will be presenting the presentation. Feedback from Dr. Curtis was he informed the class of the suggested presentation length, shared that he will be videotaping the presentation for crew facilitator, and offered final suggestions on the presentation. Alrighty, so from here, what we're going to do now, we're going to actually break down the presentation and the seminar and what it'll consist of. So we're going to have Lila come up and she's going to break down the presentation, the seminar for you guys. Right.
Thank you, Kendra. Hello, I'm Lila, and I am actually just going to look at our program and walk you through a big overview of what our 4-day seminar program looks like. So, let's get this set up for us. All right, so this is our final program that we decided on, and you can see the drum is beating is the theme that we pulled from the movie Glory, as well as all of our research that we put together. And it is a leadership seminar based in 2019, as we talked about with the dates decided on. And all of these images, just to give you an idea of how this program works, all of the images that we found, we did find the licenses for them and permissions to use them. So they are available to be used. There may be some cost with some of them, but we'll have the editable version available for you. And also, throughout the program, we have decided to make it interactive. So this is a program you can send out in digital form, so all attendees can use it on their cell phone, on their laptop, iPad, and have something easily accessible. They don't have to carry more paper with them as they're going from site to site or end up losing it or anything like that. So we wanted it to be very convenient for the attendees. And as we go through, I'll show a few of those links. And with those links also, we wanted to have all of their information at their fingertips. So if they're going to lunch at a certain restaurant, they'll have the menu available. If they want to know the location of one of the sites, they'll actually have an address with a link to the Google Maps address and information. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. And as we go through, you'll see we chose the 4-day, February 13th through February 17th, as the dates that were specified. And we wanted to start on a Wednesday through Sunday so that we could end on a Sunday. And part of the events planned will end on that Sunday morning at Mother Emmanuel. And we wanted to include, of course, crew on the full program because this is an event sponsored by crew. And here you'll see all of the locations where we have chosen to have activities. So each of these is actually a link. You can click on the address and see the location where it's at. Of course, James Island and Morris Island, those are going to be a little broader spectrum because you'll actually be going to a certain location on those. But that way, if for any reason an attendee were separated from the group or decided to do something a little different, they would still have reference points for where they're heading. And on our next page, we have all of the accommodation information. And again, all of these are interactive links. So we have Days Inn as your main stay for the full event. We have Bethel United Methodist Church as one of the host sites for a conference room. We also have Mother Emmanuel AME Church as one of the host sites, and the Charleston County Public Library as one of the host sites.
How far is Bethel from Days Inn?
So Bethel was walking distance. We actually
Okay.
found that the longest walking distance you'll have is about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that will be at the end of the Wagner, the Fort Wagner tour.
Okay.
And so all of these are actually within reasonable walking distance.
Good.
And you'll see in the logistics group, we actually provided in the budget for rental vans just in case there are those who need assistance walking or anything, or if it's a rainy day and it's flooding in Charleston, which
Yeah.
can happen, so we try to plan for that as well. And we also have all of the restaurants that we've chosen as the host restaurants in our program. And as you'll see in logistics, we actually kind of try to pick the premium options. So what you're seeing is going to be the top scale budget options. And of course, any of these can be changed or give you some other options, but you'll be able to see on the, when we go into logistics a bit more.
Talk more about
what
that,
those options
about the different restaurants, because
Yes.
Jay's from out of town, so he's aware of Toast, but talk about Husk and Hyman's and
Sure.
Magnolia's.
So Husk, Hyman's, and Magnolia's, if you were to look up any review on Charleston and which restaurant you would want to attend, these would be in those top ranges. They're also really nice to experience the low country style of food. So you'll actually be able to try shrimp and grits, corn on the cob, all of the different options that you'd have throughout Charleston, just the typical food that you'd want to find and try. So we tried to pick some options that were the cream of the crop, but also could fit within the budget. And we also planned on, Husk, for example, is one of the premium prices in Charleston, so we actually have lunch planned there to help give some options for budget-friendly seeking.
And the additional Gullah Grub?
So a Gullah Grub is catering one of our days, and the Gullah are the original people that lived here in the Charleston Low Country area. So this is actually similar food to what those in the 54th Mass may have actually tried when they came to the Charleston area. So we wanted you to have an authentic experience. There are other Gullah restaurants in the area, but most of them are very small. They're more mom and pop locations, and so we wanted to have a catering experience just to accommodate whatever group size comes. And then on day one, this will be our layout. So Wednesday, February 13th, we expected that all of our attendees would be traveling in So we wanted to accommodate for any travel time, anybody who's running late or anything. So we started with dinner at 6 o'clock, catered by the Gullah Grub. So you'll have that first experience really to bring you into what the 54th could have experienced while they're here. And that will be hosted at Bethel United Methodist Church from around 6 to 7. And then we have our first meet and greet. So of course, everybody will be hopefully interacting over dinner. But then they'll also have a meet and greet time, kind of an intro time where the crew leaders can also kind of intro, get to know everyone, kind of give an idea of the agenda for the evening. And then we wanted to go ahead and have some icebreakers. Now, of course, we want group interaction, so break down those walls and things. But we also wanted it to be relevant to the conference itself. So these are two activities that actually integrate with leadership lessons that involve history from the 54th Mass. So stand by your quote. We'll have actually quotes from the history, and where you pick your quote that kind of you identify with as a leadership role. And we'll go a little bit more into this once we go into Brad's presentation. He will actually walk through leadership lessons and things. And then we also have our leadership ball activity, which is more of a discussion activity, which will continue throughout the whole seminar. So you have interaction on top of the other activities that you're doing, so you can have good discussion throughout the seminar in between each activity. So that is the end of day one. And you'll see, I do want to review really quickly, you'll see a general theme as we go through the program. We try to set it up so that you have two big activities throughout the day, with breakfast in the morning, lunch in the middle, and then dinner in the evening, a few breaks, so especially after some of the outdoor activities where you may be on a boat going to an island, you have some breakout time to just freshen up and get ready for dinner, and then ending the day with just a time of gathering together and refreshing, and maybe a time of prayer and worship as well. So day two, our first full day, Thursday, February 14th, also Valentine's Day. So we have breakfast, 7:30 to 9. That does give a little bit of flexibility if attendees, if someone wants to sleep in a little bit later, or if they're early risers. And of course, they'll be in a great area to walk around downtown, explore a little bit outside any of this agenda. So all of our breakfasts we do have at Toast as requested. So that was one area that we'll talk about a little bit later, just with budget constrictions and things like that. Day two, we have our welcome time from 9 to 9:15, just to answer any questions about the agenda, if anybody has needs clarification on where we're heading. And then we have the Morris Island tour. So we wanted to start off with really getting into the battle and really getting a big picture of where the 54th Mass, where the action happened. So heading to Morris Island, that's going to be a large part of the day. So 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. We also have planned to have a picnic-style lunch during that time, so you can actually be there for the full amount of time. And of course, a breakout session afterwards just to freshen up and things from such a long day. And then after that, after being outside and enjoying the Charleston area, we have a movie review session. So from 4 to 5:30 at Emmanuel AME Church, we would have the movie Glory, and we actually, you'll see in our lesson plan that we have picked a couple of different scenes that we felt were great discussion scenes. We're expecting most attendees to have already watched the movie and have an idea of what's going on, but they can actually walk through as a group and point out a few lessons that they can see in action, and also just have a reminder of some of the history as well.
Now, is that one that is set then?
Can you say that again?
Emmanuel AME was set?
So I'll talk about that in just a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
And then we also have our dinner for that day, 6 to 8 o'clock at Magnolia's. So one of those options where you get that authentic low country experience. And then we have ended all of our full days with a debrief time. So run over the schedule for the next day, add any questions, but also a time if they want to gather and pray together, have worship together, any kind of reflection. You'll see in the leader lessons that we have from that first leadership ball activity, there is some discussion that we encourage, so they'll have some discussion questions they may want to run over as well. So we wanted to build that into the time. And then day 3, February 15th on Friday. We again have breakfast at Toast, and then we have our welcome session, so a pretty normal schedule, similar to the others. And then we are very excited about this. Mr. McGill, Joseph McGill Jr., Kendra made the wonderful connection with him. His reenacting group, his troupe, is actually the one filmed in the movie Glory, and he has had a big involvement in the movie. So he knows a lot of the history. He's actually a reenactor here in Charleston, still active, so he actually works with a lot of the locations that we'll be going to. So we're excited to have him as an option as a speaker. So he'll come, we'll have a question and answer time with him. We do have some leadership lessons involved, but of course, we expect him to take some leadership in that as well, so we didn't want to put him in too much of a box. But 9:30 to 11, we'll start the day off with that. Hopefully at Mother Manual Church as well. And then we have our break for lunch, catered by Panera Bread. We're going to stay at Mother Manual because then we're going to actually head out to Fort Sumter for the rest of the day. So Fort Sumter, of course, you're going to see the landscape of all of the battlefields from Fort Sumter, as well as all the history that Fort Sumter has to offer. So huge part of the day there, a really great experience in Charleston because you can see so much of the geography of Charleston. And then we do have our break again after coming back from the outdoor activities. So give you a little time to freshen up. And then we have dinner at Hyman's, so one of the great experiences in downtown Charleston for low country food. And then the debrief time a little bit later than the day before, but just allowing for, again, that refreshing time at the end of the day. And then day 4, again, similar schedule for the morning. And then at 9:30, we're actually going to head to the Slave Museum tour. So this will not have direct connection to the 54th Massachusetts, but it will give context to what slave life was like in Charleston. So in that period, so you can really get a feeling for what they felt walking through the streets of Charleston, and then also in the plantation areas and around Charleston as well. So we definitely want to give context to what the experience was for the 54th Mass. And then lunch at Husk, so 11:30 till 1. And all of this is in the downtown area, so it's actually all within walking distance. So it should be a great day just walking around downtown, really getting to experience the cobblestone streets. And then we have the Mcleod Plantation tour as well. And again, this will give a bit of context to the slave experience from the plantation point of view. But the 54th Mass, actually, there is recorded history where they were on Mcleod's plantation. Several of the soldiers received medical treatment at Mcleod, and so it'll be exciting. We're actually going to walk where they've walked and really experience what the plantation life felt like for them at that point as well. So we will have that break again, and also a lot of these breaks allow for travel time too, so we want to be sure if you run into traffic, anything like that in Charleston, you have a little flexibility between each event. And then this is our last night together as a group during this program, and so on this last night we wanted to have a good breakout session for debriefing, and so we have a campfire leadership and dinner. This will be at Sullivan's Island at the very edge near Fort Moultrie, and you can actually see the downtown skyline, the bridges, you can see most of the forts from there, and so in the evenings, especially at sunset, it's beautiful. We wanted to have a campfire dinner with the hobo dinner style, so you're actually cooking in the fire. And one of the most poignant scenes from the movie Glory is when they're all gathered right before battle at the campfire and singing together. And so that is, of course, a great experience for any group. So we wanted to include that experience just to give a little more authenticity, but also have a great dinner on the beach and really experience Charleston at its best. So 6:30 to 8:30 at Sullivan's Island, and then of course the debriefing at the hotel for any last minute questions.
Dinner? Tell me about dinner.
So dinner for the campfire. You'll see the recipe, we've actually included it, all the details on how to do a hobo dinner,
Okay.
and as well as ingredients. But basically, you wrap your food in foil, meat, potatoes, all the basic good things, and throw it in that fire, cook it. You can include s'mores, they're probably not as authentic, but delicious. So, a few options there. Bring a guitar, of course. And then day 5, so this would be Sunday morning, and again, breakfast at Toast, and wonderfully, Mother Manual service starts at 9:30. so we could include their service. Now, Mother Manual is one of the oldest historic Black churches in downtown Charleston. So we wanted to really experience what the faith-based version of the slaves' interaction in Charleston, as well as all the history in Charleston. So we thought this would be a great experience to attend the service there. And they're a wonderful church as well, just with open arms to really want to embrace some of the change happening in Charleston. And so I'll talk about that in just a little bit with more details. But then we'd also have the culmination of the leadership ball from the very beginning icebreakers. And so the end of the discussion on those points from that first icebreaker, which we'll talk about in our leadership lessons. And then we wanted to provide enough time on Sunday, so we wanted to end around lunchtime, so if people need to catch flights and get out the door, all of those things, so they could just have an easier Sunday in some way, so they're ready for the week on Monday. So this is the end of our full agenda. We do have on the program a bit more information, so we wanted to include a bio, of course, on Mr. McGill and all of the involvement he has in the area. So our attendees will be able to have some good questions prepared for him and already pique their interest. And then in the end, we do have some last images and then special thanks to all of those that we've been involved with for this program. So on our next slide, I do have some alternative options listed. So we were asked also to discuss some of the movement towards racial reconciliation in Charleston. And I happen to be going to a church that is leading that in downtown Charleston. And so there is an organization called One Charleston. And they are a collection of businesses, churches, pastors, leaders in several of the different denominations that have come together after the Mother Manual shooting. And so that was kind of the inspiration that brought everyone together, which in a way is a tragedy, but also God has turned it into a wonderful thing for Charleston. And so the director is Philip Pinckney, and if you would like to contact them for any information about racial reconciliation in Charleston, they are actually working with churches right now that are coming together. They're helping churches that are struggling in different communities that are separated racially and actually combining them to be one church family. So there's some really great things happening. So Director Philip Pinckney, I contacted him, and he recommended Rashawn Frost. He's the Citadel football chaplain and FCA director, also part of One Charleston. And he recommended him as a speaker, an alternative speaker that we could maybe work into the program. So all of their contact information is here. Also, Pastor Craig Tuck, he's from the Charleston Baptist Association, also pastor at Citadel Square Baptist Church. And Citadel Square is right downtown, outside Marion Square, and right next door to Mother Manual. And the history behind those churches are the Citadel Square Baptist Church was built by slaves, and the slaves were not allowed to attend church there. So then they built Mother Manual next door as their alternative. So these churches have existed alongside each other with hardly any interaction from some of the early days of Charleston. So now that there is a lot of change happening, they have actually hosted their first services together over the past couple of months. So Pastor Craig Tuck is a great resource to contact for connections to any other churches in the area. Mother Manual, we've been working with them just to get confirmation if we can host there. It hasn't been fully decided because it needs to go before a board for some of the decision making. So their contact information is here just for follow-up on that, as well as some alternative churches that you could look into with contact information, mostly through Pastor Craig Tuck, who's a great connector with that, and he's happy to be a resource as well. So this will just give you some options if you'd like to include more of that in the presentation over the 4 days. So we just wanted to be sure you had those options. So at this point, we've been going for about 40 minutes, and so we wanted to provide a break time in case we needed it before we jump into logistics, details, all of the fun crunch numbers, and our leadership lessons.
And as the doctor asked, I would introduce myself. My name is Brad Horton. I'm a Marine of 22 years. I currently work for the Government Space War. My background is in airspace. I was an air traffic controller for 22 years. I now still act as a consultant or an airspace SME for the Marine Corps, dealing with any type of range that we have in the DoD, from coast range all the way up to our largest bombing range. We travel to exotic places like Hawaii and Yuma, Arizona, to help them write their procedures and make sure that we're doing things safely. I also am the lead instructor for a 3-day airspace course that the DoD presents, how to manage, because every weapon system that we have obviously has a vertical piece to it that we have to protect for the aircraft overhead. So that is my background. Today I'll be presenting our Instructor Manual that supports all the outstanding research. You know, one of my things that I said early on, I didn't feel like sometimes that we were giving the research crew enough credit because of all the tremendous research they did. And we'll go through a lot of it, but just know that everything that we have here today we have it electronically, and then we have a massive file. All that research is captured, all the presentation is captured, the database, all the spreadsheets, all that stuff is going to be turned over to the instructor at the end of the period. So we'll kick it off. So the lesson guide outline, and although we call this an instructor manual, I would think of this more as a facilitator and not an instructor. We end up with 10 lessons that make up the manual, and each one we have here is just how they're laid out. Just a preparation checklist. The designator, I've just chose L5-4 for the 54th, and then I've just put this sequentially after that. They prepared, and that way, if you do happen to pass along from facilitator to facilitator, instructor to instructor, you know you're dealing with the current document. How long is this period of instruction, or this tour, or whatever it is that you're doing? How long is it supposed to last? What are you going to be doing in method? Where's it going to be located? As you'll see, some of them are going to be located at Fort Sumter, Morris Island. That will tell you where you need to be. We left it kind of, the conference room, kind of generic right now, knowing that whether we're at the hotel or we're at the church, whatever is available real time when this actually happens. The instructors required, and then any references that are utilized, knowing that all the references in the research are going to be available, but they won't be spelled out in the instructor guide. And then the training aids, anything, if you, as it says, slide projectors, any quotes, any posters that you're going to need to facilitate this course, or this portion of the course will be listed there. And so what I've done here is taken, or as we have done, I should say, taken this lesson guide. I showed you the outline, and all 10 of our lessons follow that same outline. And then we're just going to give you bits and pieces. Instead of just giving you the administrative background, we're going to give you one outline, and then we'll just talk briefly about each of the overarching classes. So if you could, please. So, continuing on. And this is the meat of the seminar, the piece of instruction you would have. We've kind of identified how long we think it will take to do each portion. Your introduction, will be in 3 minutes. Your attention gainer, your overview, your method again that you're doing it. And then normally there would not be a period of evaluation. However, there could be a time where this was rolled up into a class. Maybe they're undergrad, maybe they're graduate students, or some kind of other class where there could be some kind of evaluation piece there. So we did leave that in there as well. And then we come down to the main body, which is what takes up the majority of your time. Included in there is all the information that the instructor is going to need for that whole period of instruction. The idea that the facilitator and the instructor takes this instruction manual, reads it through, adds his or her notes, customizes it to how they see fit before they ever start presenting. They'll have title, instructor notes, all the body, and then they'll roll into the summary. All of this is included in the paper copy that we have in the back. Again, it'll be provided electronically. And what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through each of the lessons. You've heard all about from Kendra talking about the overarching view of our 5-day seminar, and then we talked about the actual program itself and how the decisions were, the restaurants and the location. And we're just going to go through what we see as the gain attention and the overview for each of the 10 lessons here, instead of going through all the administrative portion. So the lesson 1 will just be the introduction. What is this course about? It's about the 54th, and we've offered the facilitator and instructor. These are just examples. Whoever does it is going to want to come up with their own and shape it to them, something they're comfortable with presenting to the folks who have attended or coming here to attend. Again, the gain attention and the overview. What are you trying to accomplish? That's really what we're trying to state right there. We're going to set the hook with that gain attention, and then we're going to follow that right up with the overview about what we're going to be teaching or what we're going to be presenting to that class. We good? So, number 2, stand by your quote. Stand by your quote is just the follow-on. It happens early on, and if you went through the actual instructor guide, you would find the quotes all listed out. It tells the facilitator, they'll put them around the walls inside the conference room. As the attendees show up there, they then go identify with a quote, and then they get an opportunity to discuss how that quote relates to their style of leadership or what they perceive as their style of leadership. And they'll explore the quotes from different individuals, and they'll talk about, how my quote, I think it relates to me, and then I'll get to hear the other people's view as well. So again, that's early on. This is all part of that first day, getting to know each other, getting to see people with different ideas and different backgrounds as well. Please. Lesson 3, the leadership ball. Again, part of the continuation of the icebreaker. Inside the facilitator's guide or the instructor manual are a series of questions. And throughout the couple of days, those questions are meant to be interview questions to where the members who are in attendance take this and engage the other attendees and get into a little bit deeper discussion about the leadership that they feel is important and their background coming from different walks of life. And then at the very end, you'll see they get to bring that forward. And then they take, so from the beginning, they take those quotes, talk about all the quotes, then they start interviewing each other, getting to know each other better, building that bond. And then now they're going to start going out and doing the tours, going to church together, spending that debrief time in the evening. And then they'll come back together at the end and they'll talk again about that interview process. The Morris Island tour, again, we know the importance of Morris Island. We'll get to go out and literally walk the land, have the maps, have all the research that's being done, provided to them, and get a tour of, where did the men walk? Feel the land. I mean, there's nothing more than getting out there and just walking the ground. There's nothing that ever replaces walking the ground. Boots on the ground is just a high priority, and you just can't hardly beat that. If you could. Glory the movie. Again, the expectation is that all the attendees have watched Glory, as they spoke about earlier on. They've watched Glory. This is an opportunity where they will watch the movie. They'll pick it up at the 58-minute mark. What we have discovered in our research is that depending on where you download it from, which if you happen to go off and get your own version of Glory, minute 58 may not be exactly where you need to be. So you need to, as the instructor or facilitator, we're not painting you into a small box that says run your DVD player or your YouTube to the 58-minute mark. Find portions of the movie that mean something to you, that you're comfortable with, and let it pick up from there. The idea being there, something that we've taken from this class, is that good leadership, bad leadership, all people in attendance get an opportunity to raise their hand and identify that. And also the facilitator given, when they miss an opportunity to identify one of the learning opportunities, the facilitator or the instructor can step in at that time and do that. Thanks. Thank you. The guest speaker. As I talked about earlier, Joseph Mcleod Jr. is going to speak. He is an active reenactor. He was part of the movie Glory. Just a great resource. Not every day you get to speak with somebody who has someone come to speak to you. The students there or the attendees there get a great opportunity for question and answer. After he does his presentation, great opportunity to talk to someone who was there when the movie was made, but also has a deep vested interest in the history and the accuracy of the history and the accuracy of the portrayal in an actual reenactor, as opposed to maybe what Hollywood would maybe want us to see. He has consumed his life, and therefore he's vested in it, and that's the kind of folks you want to spend time with. tour of Fort Sumter. We spoke about earlier. Again, nothing ever replaces boots on the ground. We know the importance of Fort Sumter. Be a boat ride out, 4-hour evolution there, going out, seeing the lay of the harbor. What did the shipping lanes look like? Although today it looks different than it did then, but you'll see where Morris Island is. You can stand right there and look off to the harbor. To my left, I'm looking at Fort Sumter. There's Morris Island. There's where Battery Wagner was. All that was there. Right over there, here's where we're going to have our cookout at the end of the course. So a great place, elevated in the harbor, great opportunity to see the lay of the land, and again, to learn more and more about how the Civil War played out here in Charleston, and specifically with the 54th. Let's take the museum tour. Talked about, although not directly related to the 54th, you can't separate really that period in our nation's history without addressing the elephant in the room, which is the slavery piece. And this will give the people an opportunity to see the slave mark, to tour it, come to grips in their own way in their past of, how that was carried out, and whether the structure and the idea of selling off humans and those things and the complications that had as our history. Again, it's not directly related to the 54th, but it is a crucial part of what was going on in our nation at the time. And obviously, some of these people who were in the 54th, yes, obviously they knew slaves. Some of them, you could probably argue that they were somewhere in a transition period, or only moments or a half a state away from maybe being enslaved themselves. So it wasn't like they were completely separated from slavery in a vacuum of sorts. And then Mcleod, Plantation, again, the importance there is, when you get an opportunity to go somewhere that we know the 54th was there, that's where they take care of their wounded. They treated each other there. I'm sure the walls will just speak to you as you go there. And again, all this is backed in the Instructor Manual, Facilitator's Guide with facts. And then as the facilitator decides to take that manual and make it their own, we'll provide all of the research electronically instead of killing too many trees, right, Kendra? Kendra doesn't like me killing trees. But we have it all electronically, so if the facilitator decides, hey, you know what? Yeah, they've got some stuff in this manual, but I'd really like some more. Well, it's all in our database, and it's going to all be electronic, so you can dig further for yourself, and it's really kind of all balled up for you there as far as the research piece. And then the last one that we're going to go over is the leadership debrief in the campfire. Again, that's where it talks about getting together, kind of opening up over the hobo supper, if you will, sharing your leadership, what you've learned off your leadership, which will also carry into the next day. Don't have a slide for our, don't think the instructor needs help in getting people to church the following day. If he or she does, then they probably in the wrong line of work. So that will follow up the next day is the church, and that rounds out the leadership gathering. Again, going back, so what we've provided initially was that outline of how all of these look. So all we've done is taken that big outline from the very beginning, those first 2 slides, and then these 10 lessons plans actually populate all of those lessons plans in their entirety. We just did not present them in that format up here, just so you wouldn't be looking at the same, talking about the lecture lesson, talking about the tour over and over. But in the electronic copy, as well as the paper copy in the back, that's where they're all listed out as an instructor. There's a full instructor guide. The instructor guide itself is made up of this 10 instructor manual. There's lesson plans, so they can be interchanged as provides flexibility for the facilitators. Okay, we got weathered out for tour in Fort Sumter. I pull that one out. Okay, we're not doing that one. I don't have it. It's not all bound up into one big document. Each lesson has its own file, and each lesson has its own guide to teaching just that lesson with the time period, what you're trying to accomplish via the overview. Okay? I'll now turn it over to Chris, and he'll talk about how we're going to do the most, because all this right now, this is all hypothetical. As we say, without resources, it's hallucinations, okay? Chris is going to tell us about resources.
Chris, tell us a little bit about your background too.
I actually graduated undergrad at CSU. From there, I interned at South Carolina Federal Credit Union, where I've grown through the company, and I'm now managing the accounting department there. So in terms of what we're dealing with here, this was right up my alley. Okay, so as Brad said, well, my colleagues have done a good job of painting you a picture of what the day's events are going to look like throughout the week from Wednesday through Sunday. So what I want to do is just take a step back, change directions, and give you a little bit of background on how we're going to make it happen, how we're going to pay for it. So I'm actually going to borrow an example that Brad gave me the other day whenever we were going over the presentation. I want to show you what we're building, what the final product looks like before I actually start diving into the weeds. And so the top section here, both the tables on the right and the variables on the left, this is the most important piece of the budget sheet. This is what, if you're just taking this out of the box and running with it just as is, all you're going to need to do is update these highlighted cells here, and it's going to give you information on the right-hand side. So this is the car, as Brad put it, and then we're going to back up and talk about how we got to the final product, making the car. So under the attendee information, the first two lines there, the number of meals provided, the number of days, those are more for informational at this point. Early on, we were having to come up with more rough estimations as to what our meal costs are going to be. And originally it was only going to be 3 days, and that drove some of the other figures down below into the cost sections. So at this point, we've actually got a meal schedule. We know every single point. Every single meal that we're going to go to, we have a location for, average cost, and we'll talk about that. So at this point, as a final worksheet, that is more informational. The ones that you want to pay attention to really are the highlighted cells. The local attendees and non-local attendees are the first two. And those, what we really wanted to do was just provide a tool that you could come in and input this information. Instead of giving you a sheet of paper for 10 attendees, this is what it costs. For 20 attendees, this is what it costs. We want to give an interactive tool that shows that, I can say, I know that I'm going to have 15 attendees that are non-local who are going to have to pay for hotel costs. So I'm going to put that information in there. I'm going to put the 5 local attendees in there because they're not going to pay for the hotel costs. And then we can start seeing what our break-even points are and start coming up with an actual budget. And that's where the budget variables come into play. So, if you're looking at it from the instructor point of view and you want to say, I don't want to break it up, local versus non-local. I just want to charge one flat fee, whether they're local or not. You can certainly do that, but we wanted to build in an option so that if you want to price it differently for the 2 different types of attendees, you could. And that's how I kind of have it set up here, just as our first example, our first scenario. We're charging the local attendees $600 and the non-local attendees $750.
Where's that?
That's over here.
Over here?
So these are the variables, the highlighted cells are the variables. And that's where you input the information. So the last piece of information on the left is just a total budget for the event. It's going to take what we put for the budget for each of the types of attendees and multiply it by the number of attendees that are attending. Actually, I'm going to try to zoom out here. See if I can. Is that too small? Y'all see that okay? Or do I need to zoom back in?
We'll work with it.
Okay. All right, so once you start putting in your variables, over to the right-hand side is where you start to get your output. I'll talk about the first table at the top. You're going to see you got 3 rows. The budget is going to be your budget. What you put into the variables for your budget is going to multiply that times the number of attendees that you have for each category. Then the event cost, this line is your actual break-even points. So just to give you an example, show you how we can validate that. With the 20 attendees for non-local and 5 attendees for local, we can actually see our break-even points under columns K and L and put it into our variable over here. So local 445. Okay, so this is the output. Basically what we did is we said we were going to charge exactly what the break-even costs are. And if we do that, we're going to come up to a zero balance. Obviously, if you're looking at total budget, you can't divide the number of people evenly into every single cost that you come up with here. So you're going to have a few cents, plus or minus. In this case, we have 11 cents over. But you can see at the individual level, we're actually at a break-even point. So that's just kind of showing you how these numbers populate the output, and you can validate that those are actually the break-even points. If we back this up real quick. Okay. So we talked a little about actual local, actual and non-local. Those are going to be your most accurate allocated costs. We did include in column J at that top table a average per person, and basically all that does is it takes a look at what our total budget and how many attendees do we have, and divide the budget by the number of attendees to give you an average budget per person. And the same thing for the event cost. So take the total cost of the event, total number of attendees, and divide it into the total cost and get an average number of the actual cost. It's just a different way to slice the data, a different way to look at it. If we were to take that $688.95 figure and put it over in both of our variable entries over here, we would come back to another break-even point. So you can do it based on an average, or you can do it based on an actual. I would argue that the actual local and non-local is going to be a more accurate way to go. And then column M is just we were asked to provide a scenario where if an individual wanted to pay for a hotel room by themselves, this includes the cost of the full hotel room. We were given guidance that most of these individuals will be bunking together, so they're splitting the cost of the hotel room, but we certainly want to offer them the option that they can pay for a full hotel room themselves, and that would be incorporating the full cost. And so what we've actually done, just to show what that cost is we put a disclosure at the bottom, just saying if you want to pay for the additional cost, it's $76.08 per night. Okay, so that's kind of overview of the first table. The second table is just showing you kind of the different categories that we'll talk about. Hotel, meals, conference, activities, transportation, other, and instructor. Those are our different categories of costs. So we have a total for the cost and a percentage of the total. So you can see kind of where we're allocating our resources. So that section there, the first 15 rows, is really the dashboard view. And if you, like I said, if you were taking this out of the box and running with it, this would be the most important part to make sure that you understand, how these variables affect the output numbers and how you can come up with the cost of what you're going to charge the attendees. So, Dr. Gertis, is there any scenario you'd like us to run so you could see the possible output?
So you have 2 locals and 10 non-locals, let's say that. How does that change the scenario?
It's going to shoot the cost up.
Okay, and so the variable costs you already have certain fixed costs, and so the variable costs are not enough at 10 or 12 people.
Right. Right, so there is certain fixed costs that's going to be the same across the board. The Morris Island tour, you know, we're going to pay the same for the boat ride whether we have 13 or 30 people. And it's going to be, that's an expensive activity for us. So if the more that you maximize those type of activities in terms of how many people you're filling those seats, the better the cost return is going to be. Other things are like the van rentals. You know, we're renting 2 15-passenger vans. If you're, the way that the spreadsheet's built, if you're, you know, if you only have 19 people, you're still renting 2 vans. Once you get to 15, down to 15 total, then the price goes down and saying, okay, we're only going to rent 1 van. Those type of costs are costs that are capacity related, and so once you're going to have to pay the full price of that second van, you know, at least up until the point that you're moving up to another level.
What's the most optimal scenario? Is there, can you shoot for that?
I think the most optimal scenario is going to be, well, okay, so we can, if we're leaving it at 750 and 600, we're pricing them differently.
Yeah.
We can probably say, 10 local and 20 non-local. So the reason I think that, the way that it's priced now, and this is where you have to, excuse me, you have to kind of look at it from a pricing standpoint. If you look at the profit line for your actual local versus your actual non-local, the actual local is carrying the weight. You know, we're making $170 per person off of the local because they're not incurring those hotel costs, but we're still charging them $600.
Okay.
The non-local, we're only making $24.17, but they come with a higher cost that has to be accounted into their budget. So as you're looking at the break-even points, you can kind of tell, well, you have to kind of decide, well, how much money do I want to make off of this event for one, so that we can come back to the total column and see, well, right now we've got 2,200. But you just have to kind of play with the numbers because it's you know, 2 sets of variables. You're playing with the budget per individual, and you're also playing with the number of attendees as well. So the way that it's set up here, the more local attendees that you get, the more profit you're going to see because they are the more profitable attendee. But you can certainly, I mean, I wouldn't suspect myself that you would get a huge number of
No,
attendees.
I wouldn't expect that either.
A smaller minority. So that's why
Is there
I was
an
thinking-
optimal at 0 local attendees? Do you know what that number would be?
I think we can figure that here. So it's also, I mean, it's going to depend on what you put in for the budget cost. If we're just saying the flat 750, then we have to go all the way to, or I guess what we would do is we would back into it this way. If you would say, you know, we're doing 25, we would have to say that non-local 761.98 is going to be our, I mean, that's our break-even point. So you kind of have to back into the figures based off of the number of attendees that you're going to have.
Right.
And so we figure you're going to know what the number is, and then you can kind of gauge where your pricing is going to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so Lila makes a good point. One thing that we and I'll go through all of these sections really quick. But one of the last ones that we added in is the cost for the instructor. We obviously don't want the instructor to have to pay for his own hotel room, so we built that in. That is going to be a fixed cost for all his activities, all his meals, and it actually includes two. So from what I understand, it's going to be the instructor and his wife. So all of their costs are included in as a fixed cost for everyone else to share. So I'm just going to back up for a minute, change my variables back just to give me. Okay, so in terms of the hotel, we stuck with the Days Inn in Meeting Street. And we got the prices based off of February rates. We did try to, those were this year's February rates. We did try to reach out to them and get a price for next year's February rates. But booking in such a long-term advance, they actually, there's a huge premium on the price because they don't have those scheduling books open. So it was actually like $100 more per night to book it in this far in advance. So we think that it was fair to include the February prices instead, because it's going to be more comparable to a couple months out of the seminar.
And if you come with a package of, hey, I have 20 people coming, they'll be
Right.
more likely to incline to work with you.
Right.
What was past February is probably going to be next February. Okay.
Right. So that's how we came to the cost for the hotel. The $152.15 per night, that is the cost of one room. And if you look up into the section that we talked about that calculates the total cost, the formula is built so that the individual is only paying for half of a room, since we're bumping people up. And then we have that other column, as we said, to include, if they opted to pay for a full room themselves. All right, the next section is our largest section. As Lila stated in her part of the presentation, we have sort of a premium meal plan put together. And so we've actually, this whole section references another schedule. This is our meal schedule. It's broken down by day and by meal. And so how we came up to these average cost per person, there's really three different types of meals. So the first type is the catered. That was pretty much a science for us. They tell us how much they're going to charge us per person. So we're really able to nail down the dollar amount per person. And so you'll see that the total that includes tax and gratuity is going to be the attendee limit that we show in the last column. The next type of meal is, we'll just go to the next line, toast. Toast is going to be where we go to a restaurant. And we had to look at the menu and come up with a calculation, just the average cost of what it would take to eat at a restaurant like this. And we did that for Toast, Magnolias, all the restaurants that we're physically going to and sitting down and eating. So we got the average cost per person, included tax and gratuity in a total, and then said, okay, based on that total, what's reasonable to say, here's your spending limit. So if it came up, Toast was $20.46. We said, okay, well, we'll just say, here's $20 as your limit. Just try to keep it under the $20 limit. And what you could do to kind of reconcile this after the whole program is done, you could have them turn in their receipts. And this is just my thoughts, and coming from an accounting world, have them turn in their receipts, and then add up individually. Well, this person went over $10 the whole time. Is it material to have them pay back $10? And you kind of make a judgment cost at that point in time. So that's the second type of meal. The third type of meal was our actual picnic. So we had the picnic, the hobo meal, and our snack grab and go on the last day. You see those are obviously much cheaper than sitting down at a restaurant. So I'll just real quick kind of talk about how I built this. There's two tables here, one feeds off the other. The first table, we went out and we got the actual ingredients for what it would take to have picnic. How much bread are we gonna need? Your lunch meat, cheese, all of the things that you would need for the picnic lunch for the Morris Island trip. We included that in the table. And the most important part of this table was to figure out how many people would serve. Because this part is what feeds down into the bottom table, where it's basically a matrix of attendees. So your first column is your attendees. It's going to say that this is what's going to reference your total cost to how many attendees are going to be at the picnic. And if you look at we'll take the bread for the first column. If you look back up, the quantity served for bread, is 6. So we're gonna need 1 loaf of bread up until we have 7 people. So when we get to the 7th person, we're gonna have to buy 2 loaves. And so that's how this matrix is built, all the way through all of these different items, and they total up into the last column. And so whenever you look back at the meal reference, let's see, the picnic, what the formula is doing is it's going and looking at how many attendees, total attendees we have on the first cost sheet, and referencing this table and saying, well, I know we've got 25 attendees, what's the total for 25 attendees, and bringing in the cost per individual for that. So that's how we built the spreadsheet for these different types of meals. Just to show you, we did include this was our campfire meal, our hobo meal. It was a little more extensive, but same concept. And even for our snack grab and go meal, same thing. So all of that references back into the meal schedule. When we were looking at our cost sheet, meals was our number one, line item for our spend. If, like I said, we're presenting this as a turnkey solution. But if you're starting to look at it and you're saying, man, these costs are just too high, this is the first place I would start to try to start cutting costs. We picked a premium meal plan. Obviously, we've got some $45, $50 meals on here. Those can be tapered back. And another thing to think about is we started off with providing 7 meals. And then when we added 2 days on, we moved from 7 to 12. And so that added a huge cost burden onto what we had to factor into our total cost. So, like I said, this would be kind of the first location that I would start on if I was looking at actually cutting some costs. The next section under our cost sheet is our conference. So far, we've been very lucky, been able to have no cost associated with the actual venues, and actually have the audio-video equipment provided by the venues. The only cost that we came up with so far is the speaker cost, Mr. McGill. His fee is $250, so it's included under this section. That's a fixed cost no matter how many attendees there are. Then the next section is our activities. This is calculated based off the number of attendees. Obviously, there's a price per attendee and total in the last column. Most of these are variable, except for the Morris Island tour. That's going to be $950, like I said, whether we have 13 or 26 people. For transportation, I described a little bit about how the van rental worked already, but basically we're planning on renting a 15-passenger van or 2, depending on how many attendees there are. The formulas are built so that it knows once we get past 15, including the instructor and his wife, that we're going to have to rent a second van. And then along with that, we have fuel cost. That's also built off of another schedule.
So there's not a lot of places you have to drive, right? You have to drive to Mcleod. Where else do you have to drive to?
Sullivan's Island is the longest one.
Okay.
Mcleod and Sullivan's Island.
And that's on day 3 and 4, or 2 and 4, 3 and 4. No, both on 4. Is that right?
Yeah, Mcleod on 4, Sullivan's Island, the evening of day 4.
But up till that point, you can walk.
You could, and so we had looked into some other avenues of possibly doing like a shuttle service for some of these. The problem is we're on such a tight timeline that we really like the flexibility of having the vans there for us.
Okay.
And you never know if there's going to be weather issues. So a 20-minute walk in rain is probably not going to be a good idea.
Sure.
And we had a couple of those downtown that we do have listed in the logistics schedule as a walk, 15, 20-minute walk. But, we do have the vans there on site if we needed to have access to those so that we can, stay out of the weather. So that was the reason why we opted to keep the vans the whole time. As far as travel, I mean, we really aren't spending a whole lot in fuel. We calculated, let's see what we should do that. So if you zoom out, you would see that we've calculated all the distances from point A to point B to get an actual number of miles and plug those into the fuel schedule to know exactly how much we're going to be traveling. So we calculate our fuel cost. Back on our fuel schedule, you can look and see that I just did a quick web search to see what the common prices around Charleston are. Did a quick average of what all the prices are, and that can be updated at any point in time. So right here, this cell is an average fuel cost per gallon, and that's going to drive. We have the 12 miles per gallon. That's average 15-passenger van fuel mileage. The total gallons used is based off of the table, and it calculates the total cost of fuel. So that all feeds back into the first cost sheet. Okay, so that's transportation costs. Talk about some other costs that didn't really fit anywhere in the other categories. So obviously we have picnic, we're going to have the hobo meal, we're going to have some coolers. And so we looked at the coolers to see what sizes that we needed, and I built another schedule that basically says once we get to a certain number of attendees, I can look at the form and tell you exactly how many. We're going to have to go from a 70-quart cooler to a 120-quart cooler. And so the form is built so that it knows once we get 20 attendees, we're going to have to buy the more expensive cooler. But these are all things that we have to think about whenever we're planning out these picnics and the hobo meal, the campfire. Some of the other costs, just typical things you think of, if you're going to have a meal out in the elements like that, napkins, utensils, that sort of thing. We also have to provide our own firewood. So we have that cost included as well, blankets for the beach. Lighter fluid, we even have a fire grate. We have to have something to place the hobo meals onto to be able to cook them. So that price is included as well. I included a line for program printing costs because originally we were thinking we were going to print. You see it's zero because, as Lila was saying, we actually opted to go a digital route for that. So there is no cost associated with printing. And then last but not least, the instructor costs. We kind of touched on that already a little bit. But all of the instructor costs, the hotel meals and activities, all of that is going to be included in with the total cost and spread out among all of the attendees, whether you're local or not local. And then just a few disclosures down here. In order to be able to do the fire on the beach, you have to have a $500 non-refundable or refundable deposit. That's required 24 hours prior to the event. As long as you clean up, you're going to get the $500 back. The fire inspector just has to go out and make sure that you did actually clean up. So we didn't include that as a cost per se, but it's something that you would want to think about when you're pricing out and looking at your total profit, what you're anticipating in terms of the budget.
It's a lot of tabs.
Yep, it is. The only other thing I'll point out here is a logistics schedule. This is basically just the program laid out in a format to where you can see where the blue sections are. Logistically, that's going to be transportation from point A to point B. This is just a different way to look at it, so you can see from the time that you wake up at 7:30 in the morning to the time that we're leaving the debrief at 9:30 at night. This is what we're going to be doing. And then so I didn't go into this one, but this is just menu screenshots that we pulled out to calculate the average cost. We have a few calculations on the side, and also got screenshots of everything that we were purchasing, everything that would need to be purchased for the different meals. And then the only other tab I'd like to show is just a map of the general location. So these are all the points that we'll be visiting. It shows you kind of a big picture view of the locations of where we're going to be at and how they're centrally located. Just want to throw that in there for just kind of a visual for the instructor. And other than that, I think think I've covered everything. Are there any questions in terms of the cost sheet, logistics schedule, anything?
Chris, show the last one, the last
Which one?
tab, last tab, and explain why you put that.
Oh, Brad thought it would be a good idea if I put my contact information on here. If the instructor needed, if he did choose to use this as a tool, I'd be more than happy to actually, go into more detail about how the calculations are made. If he needed to make edits on any of the costs, I'd be more than happy to provide input as well. So,
Again, Chris, what is your title at South Carolina Federal Credit Union?
I'm the accounting manager
The accounting manager for the bank?
for a credit union.
For a credit union? Yeah, I understand. Okay. So, I'm grateful that you're volunteering to be able to answer questions. This was very thorough. Thank you very much.
All right. Turn it back over to Andrew.
Alright, so during the length of this project, as you see, I started off with the, as Brad would say, the not so sexy part, just to basically the dry run of what we did, and then everybody else went through the good parts of what happened. Throughout this project, there was many lessons learned, and these are lessons learned that came from the project leads. I will say for myself, I learned so much, more than I thought I would. But one, I'm not going to read all of them, but going through them, a common lesson learned was communication. From all of our group leads, that communication is very important. And also timelines, like we don't follow them as much as we would hope to. They change, and you have to be flexible in moving along with those timelines. So those are just a few points that each group lead shared and shared with me, and what they felt were good lessons learned. So in conclusion, one of the things we want to talk about is the reaction we've been getting from the community based off of this project. Those of us who reached out to different people, they've been so interested in what we're doing, and how is it really going to happen, and if so, how can I attend? I know for one, myself, Brad has expressed interest. We would love to attend it if we could be. Dr. Gertis even expressed his interest in attending. And that's not just a good job on crew for wanting to do something like that, but that's a good job on us for what we've presented and created ourselves. Also, I wanted to thank all of you for all of the hard work we've done with this project. As I stated with the little note I gave you today, thank you for sticking through to the end, to the very end. We really were to the very end. We planned out for it to be done way before this, but literally like today, we're finishing. So thank you so much. I want to thank Brian and Emily. Thank you guys so much for this great program design. It was great. Brad and Anna, thank you so much for the hard work you did in the Instructor Manual. Chris, listen. I was every time I look at it, I'm just like, what? Like, how did you? Yeah. So thank you guys, Chris and Joe, Anna and Abin. Why I said Abin and Brianna. Thank you so much, Brianna, for thank you so much. Brandon and Donovan, thank you for the site visit stuff getting there. Donovan for going all the way to Beaufort before we knew even. Thank you so much for that. And all of the amount of history and stuff that you brought into us. Thank you so much. Brad, Lila, and Donovan, thank you so much for the research that you did within the project. And Lila, thank you so much for assisting with everything. She's been a great support system for this, so thank you guys. Dr. Gertis, thank you for your support and guidance. And also thank you to Mr. J for giving us this opportunity to do this for you. It was a great experience. We learned so much while we've been doing this, and that's all I have.
Okay, but that's not all I have. So what I want to do is I want to ask you this, and this is, I'm going to start with people who have not talked, and I'm going to start with those that did research. Okay, I want to know what it was about this project that was most meaningful to you in your particular role. So just say your name, just so Jay can get a sense of who's all doing this as well. What's your name? What stuck out for you? So if you did, let's say you did a lot of research and you found, wow, I was really surprised when I read this, and then I connected it to that, and whatever. Okay, and then that's going to be different depending on what your role is, whether you were doing research or going downtown to find things or working on the presentation or whatever else. So anybody in research land, who's first? Just flag me and we'll...
I guess I can do it.
Okay, Fred?
I'm Fred, I was on the research team, and to be honest with you, it's impossible to find one particular thing that stood out. There's so many leadership lessons that are inherent in this story. It was more a matter of just choosing, just cherry picking them and writing them out. So,
Okay.
very enlightening.
Donovan, I know you have a lot.
Actually, Brad talked about some stuff I enjoyed. My name's Donovan Snell anyway, and about the 54th and their reaction to, I think it really does, the slave tour brings it together. And Brad kind of mentioned that in his part of his presentation how they were only maybe 1,000 feet from being slaves. You know,
Oh, sure.
maybe
And if they were captured, slave again or killed.
after their when they basically, after the Fort Wagner battle, they became slaves again in the jail.
Mhm.
So that was a big part of it, even though it was deleted. It wasn't until the jail that they had 54th was even recognized as U.S. soldiers. So that was huge to me. Throughout this whole process, the fact that Forbes started this with the governor up in Massachusetts, and he used his contacts from a leadership standpoint of being such a tycoon and having the ability to reach out all the way across the nation to gather soldiers to fight for such a battle that really defined our country. It was all over the place, but from the very beginning, this was the amount of research and history that just went into this pinpoint of history is something to be, and I'm sure at some point stated that.
I know you were overflowing with information. Any story that has to be told, to your mind?
I thought the jail had to be told, but anyway.
Okay.
I thought the Buford had to be told, but yeah.
Okay. Who's next? Somebody?
Is this just part of the research or just?
No, this is just what struck you the most as you were going through this process that really was meaningful to you and as you were going through it?
Sure, I mean, at least for me, my name is Abba Mwangi, by the way. Just how everybody constructed this project together and worked together was phenomenal. I just moved here last August from Chicago, and I didn't really know anything much about Charleston or much of the history here. But, with this project, it gave me such a great base. I know there's so much information, that I can even learn even further on, as I'm living here, or even just for interest. But, just about the different locations as, where the war was taking place, about Fort Sumter, the Morris Island and such, and et cetera. But, I gained so much information about, a good base about the history, that happened a while ago.
Okay. Who else? Don't all shout out once.
I think it was super timely, and I really, not only did I learn so much working with so many different people in different departments, and learning how to be led, I think, was important as well, which kind of follows along with the 54 Mass. But also just the timeliness of it was so important, because I think it's important to look at your history to inform your future progress. And I think that's why the interest in the community has been so big, because was it One Charleston? And then there's a lot of different movements happening in Charleston. So I think this could really support a lot of what they're working on in progress.
Good. Anybody else who was not one of the speakers that would like to say anything before? Go ahead.
I'm Brandon. I was part of the site visit team. Living down here, I feel like sometimes we take for granted all the history that's actually happened. And just throughout this whole presentation and project, going downtown, going to Fort Sumter, all the different sites, even just walking downtown, you can really feel just kind of the history and the different nuances of what they've been through down here. And I've been living down here about 3 years now, so I never really thought about it to too great a detail. But just after this class and working with all you guys, every day that I'm there, you definitely still feel a part of it.
Okay, good. Anyone else before I go back to the people that were already talking?
I'm Brian. I was part of the seminar program team with Emily. I think one thing that I took away that was really cool to see is we started with just the 54th and 55th Regiment story, and then somewhere maybe 50% of the way through, we started talking more about the racial tensions and change, and bringing in the Mother Emanuel Church and that type of story into this program. So that's one thing, and then the other thing, just like I said in my lessons learned last week, it was really cool to see this team form. There was a lot of chaos. I know myself at first, I didn't understand Dr. Gertis's instructions, and I was freaking out. And Kendra took over, and thank you, Kendra.
That's kind of normal.
Yeah, yeah. And then so to watch us form, and then to go through all the stages, and once everybody fell into their roles, and we started blowing black smoke, that was just really cool to see.
Okay. So, anyone else that has not talked? Okay, those of you who have talked, what do you want to say?
I would say, similar to what Emily was saying, just it was interesting how this is so timely in my life too. As I said before, I attend Citadel Square Baptist Church downtown and have been a part of the One Charleston meetings and things. And so to have all this background, being part of the research team, and then also just a part of several of the things going on, helping with site locations and a lot of information. And just seeing how it tied in so well with what's going on in Charleston right now, and remembering that it all started back then. Even the churches that we attend today, I was just there Sunday morning and waved at the people going to Mother Emanuel. This is all, there's so much background to the context of how we're making decisions now. So it's really important to remember it. And I think we may have a lot more local interest, depending on how it's advertised, and if you want more local interest, because we were like, well, there's some limitations. You've got to get 2 votes, 3 votes out there.
Yeah, no, and that's why that spreadsheet was, by the way, Chris, where are you? Smile for the camera again. You did an incredible job putting this thing together with all the linked things within it that, because you have the variable cost and the fixed cost, and you really have to make adjustments. So thank you so much for that. Brad, did you want to say anything else?
One thing I would say, going back to the whole leadership that we've talked about throughout the class, we get up there and we speak. That's not what the success is. Success is all the work that everybody did leading up to that. So don't be confused by the 4 people who got up and presented. That the work, we know the work is in the research. The work's going to visit the place. The work's getting in there on your computer late at night. That's where the work is. That's the easy part, to get up there and present everybody's hard work. So don't just think about the credit being right up there. Everybody knows it happens out here in the seats on those computers.
All right, Kendra, I'll give you the last word.
Ditto to what Brad just said, but also as Aubin and Brandon said, I recently just moved here too, and knowing Charleston is a historical, town, don't take advantage of what is actually here, and especially being an African American, living here with all of this history that has come from here. I really don't take advantage of learning more about what was before me and what it took for me to have the opportunities that I do have now. So this really kind of set me back and made me think, okay, really look back into history and what was going on and what is going on. And we were talking yesterday about Mother Emanuel and how we were actually going to bring it up. And we were like, we don't want to say it's the place of the shooting and let's leave with this old historical black church. But at the same time, as you sit and think about it, let's bring up it is the place of the shooting. Let's bring up the history, because it's like a circle is going and we're going right back to where we were. And so we, at some point, we have to stop and say, okay, where did it go wrong then? Where is it going wrong now? Where did it get fixed then? So now we can fix it back here again. And that kind of ties back into leadership as well. We figure out things are going right and then it goes wrong, and then we got to figure out how did it get wrong and how do we fix it and how do we get back to where, you know, things are just going all the way together. So everything kind of came full circle. So that's all I took away from it.
So it's interesting that you said with the shooting, because at the time of the shooting, if you remember, there was Ferguson and all the other things that were blowing up, all Baltimore, blowing up all across the country. And how the leaders in Charleston handled it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, the people whose relatives died, and were saying, we forgive you, and there's still and when he's, Dylan Roof, was that his name?
Yeah.
When he was sentenced, and there's still a chance to repent. I mean, it was just such a beautiful testimony and such a contrast. Okay, so thank you very much, Jay. I hope that this is helpful for you. I will send you not only this file, as you've seen by the time that you're listening to this now, because it's just a little weird to say it like that, but you'll have all the links and peripheral that everything that you saw here electronically, you'll have at your ready. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm sure, like as Chris volunteered, he's happy to answer, and if we can't find an answer, we'll find somebody who can answer it. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you guys for doing as good a job as you did. I really appreciate it. Okay, that's it. We're done.